A young black teenager walked into his classroom, carrying something he had been working on for months. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't polished, but it was his creation. A small device he had built from scraps, wires, and endless late nights, of trial and error. Instead of applause or curiosity, the room filled with laughter. His classmates pointed, mocked, and dismissed him as a dreamer with no sense of reality. Even some teachers shook their heads, telling him to focus on something practical. Every word was meant to break him down, to remind him of the stereotypes and low expectations placed on him. But what they didn't realize was that behind that invention was not just science. It was a story of resilience, intelligence, and the refusal to give up. At home, this teenager kept working. The taunts echoed in his mind, but so did the voice of his mother, who always told him, "They'll laugh at you until they need you." Every failed experiment pushed him harder. He studied, he tested, he refined. The invention, a device designed to save energy and make households safer, was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. Still, nobody believed him. Until one day, by sheer chance, a local science fair accepted his application. When he walked in with his invention, many rolled their eyes. But in that crowded hall, something extraordinary happened. A group of visiting scientists, experts in their fields, stopped in their tracks. They looked closer, asked him questions, and within minutes, they realized this was not just a child's project. It was a breakthrough. What followed was nothing short of life-changing. The same invention that had been laughed at in his classroom was now being studied, tested, and praised by scientists across the country. The boy who was once mocked was now being called a genius. Reporters wrote articles about him, professors invited him to labs, and suddenly, the very people who doubted him were forced to face the truth. Greatness can come from anywhere, from anyone, and especially from those society tries to overlook. His journey became more than about an invention. It became a lesson about perseverance, about believing in yourself when no one else does, and about how brilliance often shines brightest in the face of doubt. And so, what started as a dream in a young black teen's heart turned into a story that inspired thousands. His invention didn't just change his life, it gave hope to every child who had ever been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. Because the truth is, behind every laugh, behind every doubt, there is a chance to prove them wrong. This young man's story reminds us all that struggle is not the end. It is the path to strength. If his journey inspired you today, imagine how many more powerful stories are out there waiting to be told. That's exactly what we do here on Struggles to Strength. We bring you the untold stories of resilience, hope, and triumph. So if you believe in the power of never giving up, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Together, we can turn every struggle into strength. A young black teenager walked into his classroom one morning, carrying something that looked strange and unfinished. It was a device built from scraps of metal, wires, and parts he had collected from old electronics. He had spent months working on it, staying up through the night, watching tutorials, reading whatever material he could find, and teaching himself the science behind it. To him, this invention wasn't just a project. It was proof of his determination and his dream of creating something that could make life better for people. But instead of curiosity or support, the moment he revealed it to his classmates, laughter filled the room. Some pointed fingers, others whispered cruel jokes, and even a few teachers brushed him off, telling him to stop wasting his time. The ridicule was sharp, and it would have been enough to crush most young dreamers. But he didn't quit. Deep down, he knew that every laugh, Every insult was only fuel for his fire. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "They'll laugh at you until they realize they need you." Those words kept him moving forward when everything else seemed against him. Night after night, while others slept, he kept refining his creation. He tested it, failed, rebuilt, and tried again. The invention he was working on was designed to reduce wasted energy and create a safer way for families to power their homes. It wasn't perfect yet, but it carried the seed of genius. No one at school believed in him. No one in his neighborhood expected much from him, but he believed in himself. When a local science fair opened applications, he decided to take the risk. The day of the event, he walked into a large hall filled with polished projects, colorful displays, and students from privileged schools with access to far better resources. He placed his rough-looking invention on the table, his heart pounding, expecting more mockery. And yes, at first, some students smirked and whispered. But then something incredible happened. A group of visiting scientists stopped in their tracks. They leaned closer, studied the wiring, asked questions, and within minutes, their expressions changed from curiosity to amazement. What this young teenager had built, with so little, was not just impressive, it was groundbreaking. They realized they were looking at an invention with real-world potential, an idea that could spark further research and innovation. From that moment, everything changed. The same invention that had once been the source of ridicule was now being studied, tested, and praised by experts. The boy who had been mocked in the classroom was suddenly being invited into laboratories, interviewed by journalists, and celebrated as a young genius. But more important than the recognition was the lesson his journey carried. His story wasn't just about science or invention, it was about the courage to keep moving when no one else believes in you. It was about resilience, about refusing to let other people's opinions define your future. What began as a dream in his heart became a victory for every young person who has ever been told they aren't good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. And that is the real power of this story. It reminds us that behind every struggle lies the strength to rise. If his journey inspired you today, then imagine how many more untold stories of courage and resilience are out there waiting to be heard. That's why we created Struggles to Strength, to bring you powerful stories of hope, perseverance, and triumph. If you believe in the power of never giving up, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this message. Because together, we can turn every struggle into strength. He was just a teenager, a young black boy with a mind filled with ideas bigger than his classroom could contain. While other kids spent their time chasing trends, he spent his nights surrounded by scraps of wires, old batteries, and broken appliances he had collected from junkyards. What looked like trash to others became tools for his vision. Piece by piece, he worked in silence, building something that most would call impossible for a kid his age. He believed he was creating a device that could change the way energy was used in homes, making power safer and more efficient for families like his own. But when he finally gathered the courage to present his invention at school, instead of support, he was met with cruelty. His classmates laughed, mocking his project as nothing more than a pile of junk. Some said he was wasting his time. Even certain teachers dismissed him, telling him to focus on something realistic. Those words stung deeply. For a moment, he wondered if they were right. But then he remembered the words his mother had always told him. They'll laugh at you until the day they realize they need you. With that echoing in his mind, he chose not to quit. Each night, when the world slept, he returned to his project. He studied, experimented, and failed again and again. But every failure taught him something new. The invention slowly began to take shape, transforming from a messy experiment into a working prototype. He dreamed of presenting it to someone who could truly understand what it meant. That chance came when a local science fair opened applications. Nervous but determined, he carried his invention into a hall filled with polished projects from students who had every advantage he never had. Their posters gleamed, their models were perfect, and their parents stood proudly beside them. His table, in comparison, looked bare, holding only his strange little device. The whispers began again. Some students smirked, others openly laughed. But then, as the judges walked through, something remarkable happened. A group of visiting scientists stopped in front of his invention. They didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss it. Instead, they leaned in, studied it carefully, and asked him to explain how it worked. As he nervously spoke, their eyes widened. Within minutes, they realized this wasn't just a student's science project. It was a breakthrough. Something about this invention was far more advanced than anyone had expected. In that moment, the boy who had been mocked and ridiculed was suddenly being recognized as a genius. That day changed everything. News of his invention spread quickly, first through the fair, then into the community, and eventually across the nation. Reporters wrote about him, professors invited him into their laboratories, and organizations offered to help him develop his idea further. But for him, the greatest victory wasn't the recognition or the attention. It was proving that the voices of doubt were wrong. His journey became more than just the story of an invention. It became a powerful lesson about resilience, courage, and the strength to believe in yourself when no one else does. The classmates who once laughed at him had no choice but to watch, as the world celebrated the very thing they mocked. His story is living proof that genius knows no boundaries, and that brilliance often comes from those who are underestimated. And this is what Struggles to Strength is all about. Stories that remind us that no matter how many obstacles stand in your way, no matter how many people doubt you, your struggle can transform into your greatest strength. If this story inspired you today, don't forget to subscribe to Struggles to Strength, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their dream is worth fighting for. Because together, we can turn every struggle into strength. But the journey wasn't smooth, even after the recognition. With every new opportunity came new challenges. Some companies tried to buy his idea cheaply, hoping he wouldn't understand its value. Others doubted whether a teenager from his background could ever handle success. But instead of giving in, he stood firm. He said no to offers that didn't respect his work. He surrounded himself with mentors, scientists, and people who believed in his vision. Every step of the way, he proved that what started as a junk project was, in fact, a spark of genius that could inspire a generation. He wasn't just inventing a device anymore. He was building a future, not only for himself, but for countless kids who needed to see that they too could rise above doubt and disrespect. And soon, schools began inviting him to speak. Standing in front of classrooms filled with children who looked just like him, he told his story. The story of being mocked, ignored, and underestimated, yet refusing to quit. He showed them his invention, not as a trophy, but as a symbol of perseverance. Kids listened with wide eyes, and teachers who once carried doubt learned the importance of encouragement. He had gone from being the boy no one believed in to becoming the voice that told others to believe in themselves. His invention was remarkable, yes, but his courage, his resilience, and his refusal to give up were what truly made him extraordinary. And that is why his story matters. Because it teaches us that genius doesn't come dressed in wealth, privilege, or polished appearances. It can be born in small rooms, built from broken pieces, carried in the hands of someone the world tries to overlook. His journey is proof that every struggle, no matter how painful, holds the seed of strength within it. And here on Struggles to Strength, we will continue bringing you stories like his. Stories of courage, hope, and triumph against all odds. If you felt inspired by this journey, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their struggle today can become their strength tomorrow. Because every voice matters, every dream matters, and sometimes the greatest brilliance rises from the places we least expect. He was just a teenager with a dream bigger than the world around him could understand. While his classmates spent their evenings on video games and social media, he sat alone at a small desk covered with broken radios, scraps of wire, and old batteries. To anyone else, it looked like a pile of junk, but to him, it was possibility. Every piece he picked up carried potential. His hands worked late into the night, connecting wires, testing circuits, and drawing rough sketches on crumpled paper. He didn't have the best tools, he didn't have a lab, but what he did have was determination. And in the quiet of those nights, he built something extraordinary. An invention he believed could change lives by reducing wasted energy and making homes safer. But when he finally carried it into school to show his classmates, the reaction was brutal. Instead of curiosity, laughter filled the room. Some mocked him openly, others whispered cruel jokes, and even a few teachers dismissed him as unrealistic. In that moment, he felt small, humiliated, and invisible. But deep inside, he carried his mother's voice, reminding him, "They'll laugh at you until the day they realize they need you." That one sentence gave him the strength to keep going. So he went home, wiped away the sting of their words, and went back to work. Each failure was painful, but instead of giving up, he treated every mistake as a lesson. He read books from the library, watched free tutorials online, and studied designs from engineers far older than him. Slowly, his invention began to improve. The circuits held together, the design became stable, and the idea that once seemed like a child's fantasy was starting to look like a real breakthrough. When a local science fair opened applications, he saw his chance. Carrying his invention in his hands, he walked into a hall filled with polished displays and projects that looked far more professional than his. Parents proudly stood by their children's sides, and judges walked the aisles with clipboards. His table looked bare by comparison, and once again, the whispers began. Some laughed quietly at his rough prototype. He felt the same sting of doubt he had felt before, but he stayed strong. And then, everything changed. A group of visiting scientists stopped in front of his table. At first, they bent down curiously, and then, the longer they looked, their expressions shifted. They started asking questions, examining the wires, and testing the small machine. Their voices grew excited. Within minutes, it was clear to everyone. What this teenager had built was not just impressive, it was genius. News spread quickly. What had once been a target for mockery was now being recognized as a remarkable invention. Scientists invited him to their laboratories. Reporters wrote articles about his story. Professors called him a young innovator with extraordinary potential. The boy who had once been laughed out of his classroom was now being celebrated nationwide. But even with all the attention, his greatest achievement was not fame or recognition. It was the lesson his journey carried, that greatness can come from anywhere, from anyone, and especially from those society tries to overlook. His story became living proof that you don't need wealth, privilege, or expensive tools to change the world. You need resilience, courage, and an unshakable belief in yourself. And as he stood on stages speaking to children who looked just like him, he shared his journey with honesty. He told them about the laughter, the rejection, the doubt, and how all of it became fuel for his determination. He showed them his invention, not as a symbol of genius, but as proof of perseverance. In every audience, young eyes lit up, realizing for the first time that they too could dream beyond the limits placed on them. And that is why his story matters. Because it's not only about science or about invention, it's about what happens when you refuse to let the world define you. It's about the strength it takes to rise after being pushed down, and the courage it takes to believe in yourself when nobody else will. His journey is a reminder to us all that behind every struggle lies the seed of greatness, waiting to grow. And here on Struggles to Strength, we will keep sharing stories like his, stories of resilience, of triumph, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Struggles to Strength, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that their dream is worth fighting for. Because no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, your struggle can become your strength. But with recognition also came new tests. Some powerful voices tried to silence him, offering to buy his invention for almost nothing, hoping to take credit for his work. Others accused him of being too young to understand the science behind what he had created, claiming it must have been an accident or luck. Yet he stood tall, refusing to be stripped of the vision he had worked for so tirelessly. Instead of bending under pressure, he surrounded himself with mentors who guided him and helped refine his idea. Every setback became another chance to prove his strength. Every obstacle, another reminder that what he carried was bigger than himself. His invention was no longer just a project. It had become a symbol of brilliance rising from unlikely places and of resilience that could not be crushed by doubt. And soon, his story spread beyond science fairs and laboratories. Communities began to see him as an inspiration, not only because of what he built, but because of what he represented. The idea that no matter how young you are, no matter what background you come from, your voice and your ideas matter. Children across the country looked at him and thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. Teachers who once underestimated him now told his story in classrooms as an example of courage, and the boy who once carried an invention through laughter and ridicule had now become a beacon of hope for those who dared to dream. His journey wasn't just about turning wires and scraps into a machine. It was about turning struggle into strength. And here, on this channel, we will continue to share stories just like his, stories that remind us that every hardship carries within it the seed of triumph. If this inspired you today, make sure you subscribe to Struggles to Strength, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their struggle can become the beginning of something extraordinary. But perhaps the most powerful part of his journey wasn't the invention itself. It was the transformation of how people saw him and how he saw himself. He was no longer the boy who carried scraps of wire in a shoebox. He had become a young man who carried possibility in his hands and courage in his heart. He realized that the laughter of his classmates and the doubt of his teachers had never really been about him. It had been about fear. Fear of what happens when someone refuses to stay inside the box society has built for them. Fear of what happens when brilliance rises from the very places the world has tried to keep silent. And in proving them wrong, he gave courage not just to himself, but to every dreamer watching. And that is why stories like his must be told. Because somewhere, right now, Another young person is being laughed at for their ideas. Another child is being told they're not good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. But if they hear this story, maybe they will pick up their tools again. Maybe they will try one more time. Maybe they will refuse to give up. That is the power of struggle. It forces us to dig deep, to grow stronger, and to rise higher than we ever thought possible. And here on Struggles to Strength, we will continue shining a light on these powerful journeys. So if you believe in resilience, in courage, and in the unshakable human spirit, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs it. Because together, we can remind the world that no matter where you begin, your struggle can always lead you to strength.